The October rain fell steadily on the cracked sidewalk of Broadway in downtown Nashville, each droplet creating tiny rivers that carried away the remnants of another difficult day. Rebecca Patterson huddled under the narrow overhang of Murphy's music store, her weathered fingers moving across the strings of her 1973 Martin D28 acoustic guitar. The instrument had seen better days, much like Rebecca herself, but its voice still carried the warmth and resonance that had once filled concert halls and recording studios. At 42, Rebecca bore the marks of 2 years on the streets. Her auburn hair, once professionally styled for faculty meetings at Belmont University's School of Music, now hung in uneven strands around her face. Her clothes, a faded denim jacket over a worn flannel shirt and jeans with holes at the knees, told the story of countless nights spent in shelters, doorways, and under bridges. But her hands, despite the calluses and dirt under her fingernails, still moved with the practiced grace of a classically trained musician. "Sometimes I wonder if the rain knows my name," she sang softly, her voice carrying a haunting melody that seemed to blend with the rhythm of the falling water. "Sometimes I wonder if tomorrow's just the same." The lyrics flowed from somewhere deep inside her, words born from pain and longing that she couldn't express any other way. A few passers-by hurried past, their umbrellas creating temporary shields against both the weather and the uncomfortable reality of homelessness that Rebecca represented. Most avoided eye contact, but occasionally someone would drop $1 or some loose change into her worn guitar case. Tonight had been particularly slow. She'd made only $7.32 since setting up at 4 o'clock. As she played, Rebecca's mind drifted to Ashley, her 16-year-old daughter who now lived with her paternal grandparents, Harold and Diane Patterson, in their suburban home in Franklin, Tennessee. The last time she'd seen Ashley was 6 months ago, during a supervised visit arranged by the Department of Children's Services. The girl had grown taller, her dark hair now reaching her shoulders, and her eyes, Robert's eyes, held a mixture of love and disappointment that cut deeper than any physical wound. "Mom, why can't you just stop?" Ashley had asked during that visit, her voice breaking with frustration. "Grandma and Grandpa say you could come home if you just got help." Rebecca had wanted to explain that it wasn't that simple, that the bottle had become her only reliable companion after Robert's death. The only thing that could silence the memories of that rainy night when the other driver ran the red light. That losing their house had been the final straw, and by then the addiction had taken such a hold that even the love for her daughter couldn't pull her back from the edge. The sound of footsteps approaching broke her from her reverie. A man in his 50s, wearing a simple button-down shirt and jeans, had stopped a few feet away. Unlike most people, he wasn't hurrying past or avoiding her gaze. Instead, he stood quietly, listening to her song with genuine attention. Rebecca continued playing, her voice growing slightly stronger with the presence of an actual audience. The man had kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and an unassuming demeanor that made her feel less self-conscious about her appearance. When she finished the song, he applauded softly. "That was beautiful," he said, his voice carrying a slight Texas accent. "Did you write that yourself?" Rebecca nodded, suddenly feeling exposed. "It's just something that came to me. I used to teach music before." She trailed off, not wanting to delve into the complicated story of how she'd ended up here. "I'm George," the man said, extending his hand. "George Strait." For a moment, Rebecca thought she'd misheard him. She looked more closely at his face, noting the familiar features she'd seen countless times on album covers and award show broadcasts. But George Strait, the king of country music himself, standing on a rainy Nashville street, talking to her like she was any other person. I know who you are," she stammered, suddenly very aware of how she must look and smell. "I'm Rebecca Patterson." George smiled warmly. "Well, Rebecca Patterson, you've got a gift," That song you were playing, it's got something special, the kind of honest emotion that can't be taught or manufactured. Rebecca felt tears welling up in her eyes. It had been so long since anyone had acknowledged her as a musician rather than just another homeless person to be pitied or ignored. "Thank you," she whispered. "That means more than you know." "How long have you been playing music?" George asked, settling into a more comfortable position despite the rain. "Since I was 8, Rebecca replied. "My father taught me guitar, and I studied classical music in college. I had a doctorate in music education from Vanderbilt, taught at Belmont University for 12 years. She paused, wondering why she was sharing so much with this stranger, even if he was George Strait. Things just fell apart. George nodded with understanding. Life has a way of throwing curveballs when we least expect them, but talent like yours, that doesn't just disappear because circumstances change. As they talked, Rebecca found herself opening up about her story. She told him about Robert, her husband of 15 years, who had been a sound engineer at several Nashville studios, about how his death had sent her spiraling into grief and alcohol, about losing her job when she started missing classes and showing up intoxicated, about the foreclosure on their home and the custody battle she'd lost to Robert's parents. "The hardest part," she said, her voice barely audible above the rain, "is knowing that my daughter thinks I chose alcohol over her. But by the time I realized what was happening, I was in so deep that I couldn't find my way back." George listened without judgment, his expression compassionate. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment before speaking. "Rebecca, I've been in this business for over 40 years, and I've seen a lot of talented people struggle with demons. Some make it back, some don't. But the ones who do, they often have the most powerful stories to tell." He pulled out his wallet and placed a $100 bill in her guitar case. "This isn't charity," he said firmly when she started to protest. "This is an investment in your music. I want you to use this to get cleaned up, maybe find a place to stay for a few days. And I want you to write down that song you were playing, all the words and the chords." "I don't understand," Rebecca said, overwhelmed by his kindness. "I have a friend who runs a small music management company here in Nashville. His name is David Coleman. He's been going through some tough times himself lately, and I think you two might be able to help each other." George handed her a business card. "Tell him I sent you. He'll know what to do." As George prepared to leave, Rebecca called after him. "Why are you doing this? You don't even know me." George turned back, his expression serious. "Because sometimes the most beautiful music comes from the most broken places. And because everyone deserves a second chance, especially someone with a gift like yours." After George disappeared into the rainy night, Rebecca sat staring at the business card in her shaking hands. David Coleman, Coleman Music Management. The address was only a few blocks away. She carefully folded the card and tucked it into her jacket pocket, along with the $100 bill that represented more hope than she'd felt in 2 years. The next morning, Rebecca used some of George's money to rent a room at a modest motel and take her first real shower in weeks. She washed her clothes in the bathroom sink and spent time working on her appearance, trying to look as presentable as possible for what might be the most important meeting of her life. The Coleman Music Management Office was located in a small, converted house in the Music Row area. The building looked like it had seen better days, with paint peeling around the windows and a small sign that was barely visible from the street. Rebecca stood outside for nearly an hour, gathering the courage to go inside. When she finally knocked on the door, it was answered by a man in his early 40s, with tired eyes and rumpled clothes. His brown hair was slightly unkempt, and he had the look of someone who hadn't been sleeping well. "Can I help you?" he asked, his tone suggesting he was expecting another bill collector or disappointed client. "Are you David Coleman?" Rebecca asked nervously. "George Strait said I should talk to you." David's expression changed immediately. "George sent you? Come in, please." He led her into a small office cluttered with demo CDs, music sheets, and what appeared to be unpaid bills. "I'm sorry about the mess. Things have been a bit chaotic lately." As Rebecca sat down in the worn leather chair across from his desk, she noticed family photos showing David with a woman and teenage boy. But the pictures seemed old, and there was a layer of dust on the frames that suggested they hadn't been moved in some time. "So George sent you," David said, leaning back in his chair. "That's interesting, because I haven't heard from George in months. We used to do business together back when my company was actually successful." There was a bitter edge to his voice that he quickly tried to mask. "But that's not your problem. What can I do for you?" Rebecca took a deep breath and told her story again, this time including her conversation with George and the song she'd been playing. When she finished, David was quiet for a long moment. "Can you play it for me?" he asked, gesturing to an old acoustic guitar leaning against the wall. Rebecca picked up the guitar and began to play, her voice filling the small office with the same haunting melody that had caught George's attention. When she finished, David was staring at her with an expression of amazement. That's incredible," he said. "I haven't heard anything that genuine in years. The industry is so full of manufactured emotions and focus group-tested lyrics, but what you just played, that's real." "George said you might be able to help me," Rebecca said hopefully. David's expression darkened slightly. "I wish I could promise you the world, Rebecca, but I have to be honest. My company is barely hanging on. I've lost most of my clients. My wife is threatening to leave me, and my son thinks I'm a failure. The music industry has changed, and I haven't adapted well." "What happened?" Rebecca asked gently. David sighed deeply. "I inherited this company from my father 20 years ago. Back then, it was successful. We represented some big names, had connections throughout Nashville. But I made some bad business decisions, trusted the wrong people, and gradually everything fell apart. My wife, Linda, works as a nurse to support our family, while I chase dreams that probably died years ago." He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the street. "My son Tyler is 14 and he's angry all the time. His grades are slipping, he's getting into fights at school, and I think it's because he's ashamed of me. Linda keeps saying I should close the business and get a real job, but music is all I know." Rebecca felt a connection to David's pain that went beyond their shared musical interests. "Sometimes we have to lose everything to find out what really matters," she said softly. "Is that what happened to you?" David asked, turning back to face her. "I thought losing my husband was the worst thing that could happen to me," Rebecca replied. "But losing myself in the bottle and losing my daughter, that was worse. I'm still trying to find my way back." David sat back down and looked at her intently. "George was right to send you to me. Not because I can guarantee to make you a star, but because maybe we can help each other figure out how to rebuild our lives." "What do you mean?" Rebecca asked. "I mean that your music has something that's been missing from everything I've heard in years. And maybe working with an artist who has real stories to tell, real pain and real hope, maybe that's exactly what I need to remember why I got into this business in the first place." Rebecca felt a spark of hope igniting in her chest. "So you'll work with me?" "I'll try," David said, "but I have to warn you, it won't be easy. Getting clean, rebuilding your life, reconnecting with your daughter, those are battles you'll have to fight every day. And the music business is brutal, especially for someone with your history." "I understand," Rebecca said, "but I'm tired of being afraid. I'm tired of letting my past define my future." David smiled for the first time since she'd arrived. "Then let's get started. The first thing you need is a stable place to live and some professional help with your addiction. Do you have any money saved?" Rebecca showed him the remaining money from George's gift. It's not much, but it's a start. There's a woman I know, Maria Gonzalez. She's a social worker who specializes in helping people transition out of homelessness. She's tough, but she genuinely cares about her clients. I'll call her and see if she can help you navigate the system. As David picked up the phone to make the call, Rebecca felt something she hadn't experienced in 2 years. Genuine hope. Not the false hope that came from the bottom of a bottle, but the real thing, the kind that demanded action and commitment. Outside, the rain had stopped, and weak sunlight was beginning to filter through the clouds. Rebecca looked out the window and thought about Ashley, wondering if her daughter would be proud of her for taking this first step. She thought about Robert, and for the first time since his death, she felt like he might approve of what she was trying to do. The road ahead would be difficult, but for the first time in years, Rebecca Patterson felt like she might actually have a chance to reclaim her life and her music. Maria Gonzalez arrived at David's office an hour later, carrying a worn briefcase and wearing the tired expression of someone who had already dealt with 3 crisis situations before noon. At 38, Maria had been working as a social worker for 12 years, specializing in homelessness and addiction recovery. Her black hair was pulled back in a practical bun, and her professional attire, a navy blue blazer over dark slacks, was both practical and compassionate. "David Coleman," she said with a weary smile as she entered the office, "when you call me on a Tuesday morning saying you have a client who needs help, I know it's going to be an interesting day." "Maria, this is Rebecca Patterson," David said, gesturing to Rebecca, who had been nervously rehearsing what she would say to the social worker. "Rebecca, Maria Gonzalez. She's the best social worker in Nashville, and if anyone can help you navigate the system, it's her." Maria extended her hand to Rebecca with genuine warmth. "It's nice to meet you, Rebecca. David tells me you're ready to make some serious changes in your life." "I am," Rebecca replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "I know it won't be easy, but I'm tired of living this way. I want to get my daughter back, and I want to make something meaningful of my life again." Maria nodded approvingly. "That's exactly the kind of commitment I like to hear. But I need you to understand something. The process of rebuilding your life isn't just about finding housing and getting clean. It's about fundamentally changing how you deal with stress, grief, and disappointment. Are you prepared for that kind of work?" "I think so," Rebecca said. "I mean, I have to be. The alternative is staying where I am, and I can't do that anymore." Maria opened her briefcase and pulled out several forms and pamphlets. "Okay, let's start with the basics. Housing, healthcare, and addiction treatment are your 3 immediate priorities. After that, we'll work on employment, legal issues related to custody, and long-term stability." As Maria explained the various programs available, Rebecca felt both overwhelmed and grateful. There were transitional housing programs, outpatient addiction treatment centers, job training programs, and legal aid services, a whole network of support that she'd never known existed during her darkest days. "The good news," Maria continued, "is that you have some advantages that many of my clients don't. You have education, professional experience, and a specific skill set. The challenging news is that you've been out of the workforce for 2 years, and you'll need to address your addiction issues before anyone will take a chance on hiring you." "What about custody of my daughter?" Rebecca asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Maria's expression grew more serious. "That's going to be the longest and most difficult part of this process. The courts want to see sustained sobriety, stable housing, steady employment, and consistent participation in counseling or support groups. We're probably looking at a minimum of 12 to 18 months of documented progress before you can even petition for increased visitation rights." Rebecca felt her heart sink, but David spoke up encouragingly. "Rebecca, 18 months might seem like forever, But you've already been on the streets for 2 years. At least now you have a plan and people to help you." Maria nodded in agreement. "David's right. And the work you do during those 18 months, really addressing your grief, your addiction, your coping mechanisms, that's what will make you the kind of mother Ashley deserves to have back in her life." Over the next hour, Maria helped Rebecca fill out applications for transitional housing and addiction treatment programs. She explained how the process worked, what Rebecca could expect, and what would be expected of her in return. "There's a program called Second Chances that I think would be perfect for you," Maria said. "It's a transitional housing facility specifically for women in recovery. They provide not just housing, but also counseling, job placement assistance, and family reunification support. The waiting list is usually long, but I have some connections there." "How long would I need to stay there?" Rebecca asked. "The program is designed for 12 to 18 months, Maria replied. "You'd have your own small apartment, but you'd also be required to participate in daily group sessions, individual counseling, and community service. It's structured, but it's designed to help you rebuild your life systematically." As they talked, David's phone rang. He answered it with a frustrated sigh, and Rebecca could hear a woman's voice on the other end, though she couldn't make out the words. "Linda, I'm with a client right now," David said into the phone. "Can we talk about this tonight?" There was a pause. "I know Tyler's principal called. I'll deal with it when I get home." Another pause. "No, I can't leave right now. This is important." When David hung up, his face was flushed with embarrassment. "I'm sorry about that. My wife, things are a bit tense at home right now." Maria gave him a knowing look. "David, when was the last time you took care of yourself? You look like you haven't slept in weeks." "I'm fine," David said automatically, but the lie was obvious to everyone in the room. "No, you're not," Maria said gently but firmly. "And Rebecca, you need to understand something about recovery. It only works when everyone involved is honest about their struggles. David, what's really going on at home?" David looked uncomfortable, but seemed to realize that honesty was necessary. "My son Tyler has been acting out at school. He got suspended yesterday for fighting, and Linda thinks it's because I'm never home, and when I am, I'm stressed about the business. She's right, I've been so focused on trying to save this company that I've neglected my family." "What kind of acting out?" Maria asked, her social worker instincts kicking in. "Fighting, skipping classes, talking back to teachers. His grades have dropped from A's and B's to C's and D's. Linda says he told her he's embarrassed to tell his friends what his dad does for a living because nobody important would work with me." Rebecca felt a pang of sympathy for David. It sounds like he's hurting too. "The thing is," David continued, "I got into music because I love it, because I wanted to help artists tell their stories. But somewhere along the way, it became about money and success and proving myself worthy of my father's legacy. I forgot about the music." Maria leaned forward in her chair. "David, I work with families in crisis every day, and I can tell you that Tyler's behavior is a cry for help. He's not just embarrassed by your work, he's worried about you. Kids act out when they feel like their parents are struggling and they don't know how to help." "So what am I supposed to do?" David asked. "Give up on the business? Let my father's company die?" "Maybe," Maria said bluntly. "You need to ask yourself what your father would really want, a successful business or a son who's present for his own family." The room fell silent as David considered her words. Rebecca, meanwhile, was thinking about Ashley and wondering how many times her daughter had felt like Tyler, worried about a parent who was too consumed by their own struggles to be truly present. "I have an idea," Rebecca said quietly. "What if we tried to help each other? You help me rebuild my music career, and I help you remember why you love music in the first place. Maybe Tyler would respect your work more if he saw you working with an artist who was using music for something meaningful, not just commercial success. David looked intrigued. What do you mean? I mean that my story, addiction, homelessness, fighting to get my daughter back, those are stories that could help other people. Music has always been my way of processing emotions and experiences. Maybe instead of just trying to make hit songs, we could focus on making music that actually means something. Maria smiled approvingly. That's exactly the kind of thinking that leads to sustainable recovery. Rebecca, you're talking about finding purpose in your pain, which is one of the most powerful motivators for staying clean. But would it be commercially viable? David asked, his business instincts warring with his emotional response to Rebecca's idea. Does it matter? Rebecca replied. I mean, obviously we need to make enough money to survive. But what if the goal was to create something meaningful first and worry about commercial success second? David was quiet for a moment, then looked at the family photos on his desk. You know, when I was Tyler's age, my dad would bring me to the office sometimes. He'd play me demo tapes from new artists and ask what I thought. He said the best music came from people who had something real to say, not from people who were trying to say what they thought others wanted to hear. It sounds like your father was a wise man, Maria said. And it sounds like Tyler might benefit from seeing that side of your work, the meaningful connections, the real stories, the way music can help people heal. As their conversation continued, Rebecca felt a sense of connection and purpose that had been missing from her life for years. She was beginning to understand that recovery wasn't just about stopping drinking, it was about rebuilding her identity around something positive and meaningful. Maria helped Rebecca complete the application for the Second Chances program and promised to make some calls to expedite the process. She also gave Rebecca information about outpatient addiction counseling and support groups, emphasizing that consistent participation would be crucial for both her recovery and her eventual custody case. I want to see you in my office next week, Maria told Rebecca as they prepared to leave. We'll check on your housing application and start working on a comprehensive plan for family reunification. In the meantime, I want you to attend at least 3 AA meetings this week and start looking into counseling options. After Maria left, David and Rebecca spent another hour talking about music and their shared vision for creating something meaningful together. David played her some demos from other artists he'd worked with, and Rebecca shared more of her original songs. Rebecca, I have to ask you something, David said, as the afternoon wore on. Are you sure you're ready for this? The music business can be brutal, and you're already dealing with so many challenges. I don't want to add pressure that might jeopardize your recovery. Rebecca considered his question carefully. David, for the past 2 years, I've been surviving day by day with no purpose beyond getting through each 24 hours, having something to work toward. Something that combines my love of music with helping other people. That feels like the first real reason I've had to stay sober. Okay, David said, extending his hand to her. Partners? Partners, Rebecca agreed, shaking his hand firmly. As Rebecca left David's office that evening, she walked past the spot where she'd been playing guitar the night before when George Strait found her. It seemed impossible that less than 24 hours had passed since that encounter. So much had changed, yet she knew the real work was just beginning. She thought about calling Ashley, but decided to wait until she had more concrete progress to report. Instead, she used some of George's money to buy a notebook and spent the evening in her motel room writing down the lyrics to all the songs she'd been composing in her head during her time on the streets. As she wrote, Rebecca realized that her experiences, as painful as they'd been, had given her a depth of understanding about human struggle that she'd never had before. Her music had always been technically proficient, but now it had something more: authenticity born from genuine suffering and genuine hope. The next morning, Maria called to tell Rebecca that a spot had opened up at Second Chances and she could move in that afternoon. As Rebecca packed her few belongings, she felt a mixture of excitement and fear. She was about to take the first real step toward rebuilding her life, and there would be no going back. The Second Chances facility was a converted apartment complex in a quiet neighborhood about 20 minutes from downtown Nashville. Rebecca's apartment was small but clean, a studio with a kitchenette, a bathroom, and a small living area that doubled as a bedroom. After 2 years of uncertainty about where she'd sleep each night, having her own key and her own space felt like a tremendous luxury. Her first group counseling session was that evening. As Rebecca sat in the circle with 8 other women, all at different stages of recovery, she felt both nervous and hopeful. Each woman shared her story: addiction, domestic violence, mental illness, job loss, family breakdown. The common thread was that they'd all lost control of their lives and were working to rebuild. When it was Rebecca's turn to share, she found herself talking not just about her addiction and homelessness, but about her music and her new partnership with David. She talked about wanting to use her experiences to help others and about her hope of eventually reunifying with Ashley. "That's beautiful, Rebecca," said Jennifer Walsh, the group facilitator and a recovering addict herself. "But I want you to be careful about putting too much pressure on yourself too quickly. Recovery is about taking things one day at a time and building sustainable habits. Grand gestures and big dreams are wonderful, but they can also become sources of stress that lead to relapse." Rebecca nodded, understanding the wisdom in Jennifer's caution. "How do I balance having goals that motivate me with being realistic about the process?" "By celebrating small victories," Jennifer replied. "Every day you stay sober is a victory. Every group session you attend, every honest conversation you have, every small step toward rebuilding your relationship with your daughter, those are all meaningful achievements." As Rebecca settled into her new routine over the following weeks, she began to understand what Jennifer meant. Some days were harder than others, days when the cravings were strong or when she felt overwhelmed by the amount of work ahead of her. But gradually, she began to build momentum. She attended AA meetings 3 times a week and started seeing a counselor who specialized in grief and addiction. She began volunteering at a local soup kitchen, which helped her feel useful and connected to her community. And she continued working with David, writing songs and slowly building a repertoire of original music that told her story with honesty and hope. The road ahead was still long and uncertain, but for the first time in years, Rebecca Patterson felt like she was moving in the right direction. 3 months into her stay at Second Chances, Rebecca had established a routine that gave structure to her days and purpose to her recovery. She woke each morning at 6, attended a brief meditation session with other residents, then spent an hour writing in her journal, a practice her counselor, Dr. Patricia Williams, had encouraged to help process her emotions without turning to alcohol. Dr. Williams was a soft-spoken woman in her 50s who specialized in trauma and addiction. Her office, located in a converted house near Music Row, was filled with comfortable furniture, soft lighting, and an impressive collection of books on psychology and recovery. During their weekly sessions, she helped Rebecca understand the connections between her grief over Robert's death, her guilt about Ashley, and her use of alcohol as a numbing agent. "Grief isn't linear, Rebecca," Dr. Williams explained during one particularly difficult session. "You can make progress for weeks, then have a day where the pain feels as fresh as it did 3 years ago. That's normal, but it's also why you need healthy coping mechanisms." Rebecca had been having nightmares again, vivid dreams about the night Robert died, about losing Ashley, about waking up on the streets with no memory of how she'd gotten there. "Sometimes I feel like I'm drowning in my own memories," she admitted. The music helps, but when I'm alone at night, everything comes flooding back. Tell me about the music, Dr. Williams said. How does it help you process these feelings? Rebecca thought for a moment. When I'm writing or playing, it's like I can take all the chaos in my head and organize it into something coherent. The emotions are still there, but they have structure, purpose. Instead of just hurting, I'm creating something from the hurt. That's a powerful insight, Dr. Williams replied. You're essentially transforming your pain into something meaningful. But I want you to also develop non-musical coping strategies for those moments when you can't access your guitar. They worked on breathing exercises, mindfulness techniques, and what Dr. Williams called grounding practices, ways to stay connected to the present moment when memories threaten to overwhelm her. Rebecca learned to identify the physical sensations that preceded her strongest cravings, and developed strategies for managing them without alcohol. Meanwhile, her partnership with David was evolving in unexpected ways. David's son Tyler had been having increasing problems at school, and Linda had given David an ultimatum: get family counseling, or she was taking Tyler and moving in with her sister in Memphis. I don't understand what's happening to him, David told Rebecca during one of their afternoon sessions. He used to be such a good kid, respectful, responsible, interested in everything. Now he's angry all the time, he won't talk to me, and Linda says he told her he wishes I'd never been born. Rebecca, who'd been working on a new song about father-daughter relationships, looked up from her guitar. David, can I ask you something personal? Sure. When was the last time you and Tyler did something together that wasn't related to his problems? Not a lecture about his grades or behavior, not a punishment or a reward, just spending time together because you enjoy each other's company? David was quiet for a long moment. I honestly can't remember. The past year has been so consumed with trying to save the business and dealing with his acting out that our conversations are always about problems. I think Tyler is trying to get your attention, Rebecca said gently. When Ashley was going through a difficult phase when she was 13, Robert told me something that stuck with me. He said that misbehavior is often a child's way of asking, "Do you still love me even when I'm not perfect?" David's eyes filled with tears. But I'm trying to provide for him, to build something that will give him opportunities I never had. I understand that, Rebecca replied. But maybe what he needs most right now isn't opportunities for the future. Maybe he just needs his dad to be present in the moment. That afternoon, David made a decision that surprised everyone, including himself. Instead of going home to another tense dinner and argument about Tyler's latest transgression, he went to Tyler's school and checked him out early, claiming a family emergency. "Where are we going?" Tyler asked suspiciously as he got into David's car. At 14, Tyler was tall for his age, with his father's brown hair and his mother's green eyes. He wore the uniform of teenage rebellion, baggy jeans, an oversized hoodie, and an expression that suggested the world owed him something. "We're going to play hooky," David said simply. "What? You heard me? We're skipping the rest of the day and we're going to go have fun. No lectures, no discussions about your grades or behavior, no problem solving. Just father and son hanging out." Tyler stared at his father as if he'd grown a second head. "Are you feeling okay, Dad? Did you hit your head or something?" David laughed, really laughed, for the first time in months. "Maybe I did. Maybe I've been hitting my head against the wall for so long that I finally knocked some sense into myself." They drove to Centennial Park, where David had taken Tyler as a small child to feed the ducks and play on the playground. Tyler was too old for the playground now, but they walked around the lake, talking about everything except school, grades, and family problems. "Dad," Tyler said as they sat on a bench watching joggers and dog walkers pass by, "are you and Mom getting divorced?" The question caught David off guard. Why would you ask that? Because you fight all the time, and Mom cries when she thinks I'm not looking, and you sleep in your office half the time." David felt his heart breaking. "Tyler, I love your mother very much, and I love you more than anything in the world. We're going through some difficult times, but that doesn't mean we're giving up on our family. But what if you can't fix the business? What if we lose our house like some of my friends' families did?" David realized that Tyler's acting out wasn't just typical teenage rebellion. He was scared of losing his home, his stability, his family. And David had been so focused on trying to prevent those losses that he'd failed to address Tyler's fears. "Tyler, I need to tell you something," David said. "I've been so worried about providing for you and Mom that I forgot about just being your dad. That's not your fault, and it's not fair to you." "I don't care if you're successful, Dad," Tyler said quietly. "I just want you to be happy. When I was little, you used to play guitar and sing to me, and you always seemed happy then. Now you just seem tired and worried all the time." That evening, David came home with Tyler and found Linda in the kitchen preparing dinner with the resigned expression of someone going through familiar motions. "How was school?" she asked Tyler automatically. "We didn't go," Tyler replied, and Linda's head snapped up in alarm. "David, what? I took him out early so we could spend some time together," David said. "Real time, not crisis management time. And Linda, I want to talk to you about some changes I think we need to make." Over dinner, David talked to his family about Rebecca's story and how working with her had reminded him why he'd gotten into music in the first place. He told them about her journey from homelessness to recovery, about her desire to reconnect with her daughter, and about how her music was helping her heal. "I want to bring Tyler to the office sometime," David said to Linda. "Not to show off or prove anything, but so he can see what I'm really trying to do with my work. Rebecca is writing songs that could help other people going through similar struggles. It's not just business, it's meaningful." Linda looked surprised but intrigued. "And you think this could help save the company?" "I don't know if it will save the company," David admitted. "But it might save something more important, my passion for what I do. And maybe that will be enough." The next day, David brought Tyler to the office during one of his sessions with Rebecca. Tyler sat quietly in the corner while Rebecca played some of her new songs, including one called Ashley's Song that she'd written about missing her daughter. When she finished, Tyler looked up from his phone for the first time since arriving. "That was really good," he said. "It made me think of this kid at school whose parents got divorced and he had to move in with his grandparents." Rebecca smiled. "Music has a way of helping us understand that we're not alone in our struggles. That's what I'm hoping these songs will do for other people." "Dad," Tyler said, "I think what you're doing is actually pretty cool." The validation from his son meant more to David than any Grammy nomination could have. But the real breakthrough came later that week when Tyler asked if he could come to the office again. "I've been thinking about that song about missing your daughter," Tyler told Rebecca. "Do you think music could help other kids who are worried about their families?" Rebecca and David exchanged glances. "What do you mean?" Rebecca asked. "Well, like, what if there were songs that helped kids understand what their parents are going through? Sometimes I get mad at Dad, but I don't really understand why he's so stressed all the time. Maybe if there was music that explained it." "Tyler," David said slowly, "are you suggesting we write songs from a kid's perspective about family problems?" "Maybe," Tyler said, suddenly looking embarrassed. "I mean, it's probably a stupid idea." "It's not stupid at all," Rebecca said enthusiastically. "It's brilliant. Tyler, would you want to help us write something like that?" Over the following weeks, the three of them began collaborating on a song called "When Home Feels Broken." Tyler contributed lyrics from a teenager's perspective, while Rebecca and David provided the musical structure and adult insights. The process brought David and Tyler closer together and gave Tyler a sense of purpose in his father's work. Meanwhile, Rebecca was facing her own family challenges. Maria had arranged for Rebecca to have a supervised visit with Ashley, her first in 6 months. The meeting was scheduled to take place at the Department of Children's Services office, with a social worker present to observe their interaction. Rebecca spent days preparing for the visit, practicing what she would say and trying to manage her anxiety. Dr. Williams helped her set realistic expectations for the meeting. Ashley may be angry, confused, or distant, Dr. Williams warned. She's been protecting herself emotionally from disappointment. Don't expect her to immediately forgive you or express enthusiasm about your recovery. Just focus on being present and honest. The day of the visit, Rebecca arrived at the DCS office 30 minutes early. She wore her best clothes, a simple dress and cardigan that she'd bought with money from her part-time job at a local coffee shop, and carried a handwritten letter for Ashley along with sheet music for Ashley's song. When Ashley walked into the visiting room, Rebecca's heart nearly stopped. Her daughter had grown taller and more mature in the 6 months since their last meeting. At 16, Ashley was beginning to look like a young woman rather than a girl. Her dark hair was styled differently, and she wore clothes that Rebecca didn't recognize, gifts from her grandparents probably. "Hi, Mom," Ashley said quietly, her voice carefully neutral. "Hi, sweetheart," Rebecca replied, fighting back tears. "You look beautiful. You've grown so much." Ashley sat down across from Rebecca at the small table, maintaining physical distance. The social worker, Ms. Janet Foster, sat nearby with a clipboard, observing but not interfering. "Grandma and Grandpa told me you're in some kind of program now," Ashley said, her tone suggesting she'd heard promises before. "I am," Rebecca said. "It's called Second Chances. I have my own apartment, and I'm going to counseling and AA meetings. I've been sober for 3 months. 3 months, Ashley repeated, and Rebecca could hear the skepticism in her voice. That's not very long. "You're right," Rebecca acknowledged. "It's not very long, but it's longer than I've been able to manage in the past 2 years, and I'm taking it one day at a time." Ashley was quiet for a moment, studying her mother's face. "You look different," she said finally. "Healthier, I guess." "I feel different," Rebecca said. "Ashley, I know I have a lot to make up for. I know I hurt you badly, and I know that saying I'm sorry isn't enough, but I want you to know that getting better, getting you back, that's the most important thing in my life." "But what if you can't stay sober?" Ashley asked, her voice cracking slightly. "What if you promise to get better and then you don't? I can't go through that again, Mom. It hurt too much the first time." Rebecca felt tears streaming down her face. "I can't promise you that I'll never struggle again, Ashley. Addiction is something I'll have to manage for the rest of my life. But I can promise you that I'm doing everything I can to get better. I'm in counseling, I go to meetings, I have people helping me, and I've found something that gives me purpose again." "What do you mean?" Rebecca pulled out the sheet music for Ashley's song. "I've been writing music again, songs about my experiences, about missing you, about hope and healing. There's a man named David who's helping me, and we're working together to create music that might help other people going through similar struggles." Ashley looked at the sheet music with interest. Rebecca had always shared her musical work with her daughter, teaching her piano and encouraging her to sing. "Can you play it for me?" Ashley asked hesitantly. Ms. Foster looked uncertain. "We don't usually have musical instruments in the visiting room." "I could sing it," Rebecca offered, "if that would be okay." Ashley nodded, and Rebecca began to sing Ashley's song quietly, her voice filling the small room with a melody that spoke of love, loss, regret, and hope. The lyrics told the story of a mother's love that survived even the darkest circumstances and a promise to keep fighting to be worthy of her daughter's love in return. When Rebecca finished, Ashley was crying. "That's beautiful, Mom. Did you really write that about me?" Every word, Rebecca said. Ashley, you are the reason I get up every morning and choose to stay sober. You are the reason I'm fighting so hard to rebuild my life. For the first time since the visit began, Ashley reached across the table and took her mother's hand. I miss you, Mom. I miss our family, but I'm scared. I'm scared too, Rebecca admitted. But I think maybe being scared means we care about getting this right. The rest of the visit passed more easily, with Ashley asking questions about Rebecca's recovery program and sharing stories about school, her friends, and her grandparents. When their hour was up, Ashley hugged her mother for the first time in 6 months. Can I visit you again? Ashley asked. I hope so, Rebecca said. But that's up to the social workers and your grandparents. I have to prove that I can stay stable and sober. How long will that take? Probably about a year, Rebecca said honestly. Maybe longer. But Ashley, even if we can't live together right now, I hope we can rebuild our relationship. I hope you'll let me be part of your life again, even if it's just visits like this. Ashley nodded. I'd like that, Mom. And maybe you could send me recordings of your songs. I'd like to hear them. Driving back to Second Chances after the visit, Rebecca felt emotionally drained but hopeful. The meeting hadn't been a miracle reunion, but it had been honest and loving. Ashley was willing to give her a chance, and that was more than Rebecca had dared hope for. That evening, she called David to tell him about the visit. He was at home, helping Tyler with homework, a scene that would have been unimaginable just a few weeks earlier. Rebecca, that's wonderful, David said. How are you feeling about it? Hopeful, Rebecca said, and terrified. She's willing to try, but I know I have a long way to go to earn back her trust. The fact that she's willing to try is huge, David said. And Rebecca, I have some news too. I played some of our songs for a friend of mine who works at a small record label. He's interested in hearing more. Rebecca felt a surge of excitement mixed with anxiety. Really? What does that mean? It means we might have an opportunity to record some of your songs professionally. Not a major label deal, but a chance to get your music out there and see how people respond to it. David, I don't know if I'm ready for that kind of pressure, Rebecca said. What if I mess this up? Rebecca, David said gently, 6 months ago you were living on the streets. 3 months ago you were afraid to walk into my office. Look how far you've come. You don't have to be perfect, you just have to be authentic. As Rebecca ended the call and prepared for bed, she thought about the day's events. Seeing Ashley had reminded her of how much she'd lost and how much work lay ahead. But it had also reminded her of what she was fighting for. Not just her own recovery, but the chance to be the mother Ashley deserved. She picked up her guitar and began working on a new song, one that captured the complex emotions of the day. It was about second chances, about the courage required to hope again after devastating loss, and about the love between a mother and daughter that could survive even the darkest circumstances. The melody came easily, flowing from her fingers as naturally as breathing. For the first time since Robert's death, Rebecca felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. 6 months into her recovery, Rebecca faced her first major crisis. It started on a Tuesday morning in April, when she received a call from Harold Patterson, Ashley's grandfather, informing her that Ashley had been in a car accident. She's going to be okay, Harold said quickly, hearing Rebecca's sharp intake of breath. But she's in the hospital with a concussion and a broken arm. She's been asking for you. Rebecca's hands shook as she hung up the phone. Every instinct screamed at her to drop everything and run to her daughter. But she was in the middle of her shift at the coffee shop, and leaving without notice could jeopardize her job, one of the stability factors the court would consider in any custody evaluation. She called David, her voice barely controlled. Ashley's been hurt. She's in the hospital and she's asking for me, but I can't just leave work. What do I do? Where is she? David asked immediately. Vanderbilt University Medical Center. Harold said she has a concussion and a broken arm, but they're keeping her overnight for observation. Rebecca, go to the hospital. I'll call your manager and explain the situation. Family emergencies are exactly the kind of circumstances any reasonable employer would understand. But when Rebecca arrived at the hospital, she faced an unexpected obstacle. The receptionist informed her that only immediate family members were allowed in the ICU, and since Rebecca didn't have legal custody, she couldn't be added to the visitor list without Harold's explicit permission. "But I'm her mother," Rebecca said, fighting back panic. "I understand, Mom, but according to our records, the emergency contacts are Harold and Diane Patterson. You'll need their permission to visit." Rebecca called Harold, but his phone went straight to voicemail. She tried Diane with the same result. Sitting in the hospital waiting room, unable to see her injured daughter, Rebecca felt the familiar crushing weight of powerlessness that had driven her to drink in the past. For 45 minutes, she sat staring at the vending machines across the hallway, thinking about how easy it would be to walk out of the hospital, find the nearest bar, and numb the terrible anxiety that was building in her chest. The craving was stronger than anything she'd experienced in months. Instead, she called Dr. Williams, who answered on the first ring. "Rebecca, what's wrong?" Rebecca explained the situation, her voice breaking as she described sitting in the hospital, unable to see Ashley. "I can't handle this," she said. "I want to drink so badly I can barely think straight. What kind of mother am I if I can't even be there when my daughter needs me?" "Rebecca, listen to me," Dr. Williams said firmly. "You are exactly the kind of mother who calls her therapist instead of going to a bar when she's in crisis. You are the kind of mother who's been working every day for 6 months to earn back the right to be in that hospital room. But what if something happens to her and I'm not there? Then you'll deal with that when it happens. But right now, Ashley is safe, she's being cared for, and you're making the choice to stay sober so that when you do see her, you can be the mother she needs." Dr. Williams stayed on the phone with Rebecca for 20 minutes, walking her through breathing exercises and helping her remember the coping strategies they'd practiced. Eventually, Harold called back and gave permission for Rebecca to visit. When Rebecca finally saw Ashley in the hospital bed, her daughter looked so young and vulnerable that Rebecca nearly broke down completely. Ashley's left arm was in a cast and she had a bandage on her forehead, but she was awake and alert. "Mom," Ashley said groggily, "you came." "Of course I came, sweetheart," Rebecca said, taking Ashley's uninjured hand. "How are you feeling?" "Like I got hit by a truck," Ashley said with a weak smile. "The other driver ran a red light, just like—" She trailed off, realizing what she'd almost said. "Just like what happened to your dad," Rebecca finished gently. "I know, baby. I thought about that too." They sat together quietly for a while, both processing the echo of past tragedy. Finally, Ashley spoke again. "Mom, when I woke up in the ambulance, you were the first person I wanted to see. Not Grandma and Grandpa, not my friends, you. And then I remembered that you might not be able to come, and that made me sadder than being hurt." Rebecca felt tears streaming down her face. "Ashley, I will always come when you need me, no matter what obstacles I have to overcome, I promise you that." "But what if you start drinking again?" Ashley asked, voicing the fear that was never far from either of their minds. "Then I'll get help again," Rebecca said, "and I'll keep getting help until I get it right, because losing you is not an option." Ashley squeezed her mother's hand. "I've been thinking about something. Grandma and Grandpa are great, but they're old and they worry about everything. They're afraid to let me take any risks or try new things because they're scared something will happen to me." "What do you mean?" "I mean that I want to try living with you again, Mom. Not right away. I know you're not ready yet. But maybe in a few months, we could try weekends or something." Rebecca's heart leapt, but she forced herself to be realistic. "Ashley, that would mean everything to me. But there are a lot of legal steps we'd have to go through. and I'd have to prove that I can provide a stable home for you." "I know," Ashley said, "and I want you to prove it. I want to know that you're really better before I take that risk. But Mom, I also want you to know that I'm willing to take that risk eventually." Over the next few days, as Ashley recovered from her injuries, something shifted in their relationship. Ashley began calling Rebecca every evening, sharing details about her day, her friends, her plans for after graduation. Rebecca, meanwhile, continued her recovery work with renewed motivation. But the accident had also awakened something else in Rebecca, a fierce determination to accelerate her progress toward regaining custody. She began attending AA meetings daily instead of 3 times a week. She took on extra hours at the coffee shop to save money for a larger apartment. And she threw herself into her music with an intensity that surprised even David. "Rebecca, you need to be careful," Dr. Williams warned during one of their sessions. "I understand your urgency about getting Ashley back, but recovery doesn't work when you treat it like a sprint. It's a marathon." "But what if something else happens to her?" Rebecca asked. "What if she needs me and I'm still not legally able to be there? Then you'll handle it the same way you handled the hospital situation, by staying sober and doing everything in your power to be present for her," Dr. Williams replied. "Rebecca, rushing your recovery to meet an arbitrary timeline is exactly the kind of pressure that leads to relapse." Dr. Williams was right to be concerned. Over the following weeks, Rebecca's behavior became increasingly driven and perfectionistic. She was working 50 hours a week between the coffee shop and a new part-time job at a music store. She was attending multiple recovery meetings daily, sometimes going to 3 different AA groups in a single day. She was writing songs constantly, often staying up until 2 or 3 in the morning. David noticed the change during one of their musical sessions. Rebecca seemed agitated and unfocused, unable to concentrate on the creative process that had previously brought her peace. "Rebecca, when's the last time you took a day off?" he asked. "I don't need days off," she replied curtly. "I need to prove that I can provide for Ashley." "But you're burning yourself out. Look at you. You're exhausted, you're irritable, and your music is suffering," Rebecca snapped. "My music is suffering? David, my music is the least important thing in my life right now. Getting my daughter back is what matters." "But Rebecca, your music is part of what's going to help you stay sober and build a meaningful life. If you abandon everything that brings you joy just to check boxes for the court system, you're setting yourself up for failure." Their argument escalated, with Rebecca accusing David of not understanding the pressure she was under, and David trying to make her see that she was repeating the same obsessive patterns that had contributed to her problems in the past. "You know what?" Rebecca said finally. "Maybe we should take a break from the music stuff. I need to focus on what really matters." David watched her gather her guitar and sheet music with growing alarm. "Rebecca, don't do this. Don't isolate yourself from the things and people that support your recovery." But Rebecca was already walking out the door. For the next 2 weeks, Rebecca threw herself even deeper into work and recovery meetings, but she avoided David's calls and stopped playing music altogether. She told herself she was being disciplined and focused, but the truth was that she was miserable. Without music as an emotional outlet, Rebecca found herself struggling with the same anxiety and depression that had plagued her before. But now she was afraid to admit it because she thought it would be seen as weakness or instability. The crisis came on a Saturday morning when Rebecca was working the opening shift at the coffee shop. She was running on 3 hours of sleep and was in the middle of serving a particularly difficult customer when she suddenly felt overwhelmed by dizziness and nausea. "Are you okay, honey?" asked Janet Morrison, her supervisor, as Rebecca gripped the counter for support. "I'm fine," Rebecca said automatically, but she clearly wasn't. Her hands were shaking, she was pale, and she looked like she might faint. "No, you're not. Sit down. When's the last time you ate?" Rebecca realized she couldn't remember. She'd been so focused on working and attending meetings that she'd been skipping meals and surviving on coffee and nervous energy. Janet sent Rebecca home with instructions to rest and eat, and to not come back to work until she was feeling better. Instead of going home to her apartment at second chances, Rebecca found herself walking aimlessly through downtown Nashville, ending up at the spot where George Strait had found her 8 months earlier. She sat on the sidewalk, but this time without her guitar, feeling more lost than she had in months. She wasn't homeless anymore. She wasn't drinking. She was working and attending meetings and doing everything right. So why did she feel so empty? Her phone rang. It was Ashley. "Hi, Mom. I was just calling to check in. How are you?" Rebecca started crying, unable to maintain the facade of having everything under control. "Mom, what's wrong?" "I'm scared, Ashley," Rebecca admitted. "I'm trying so hard to be perfect, to prove that I deserve you back, but I feel like I'm falling apart inside." "Mom, where are you?" "I'm downtown, just sitting on the street thinking." "Are you going to drink?" The question surprised Rebecca. "No," she said, and realized she meant it. "No, I'm not going to drink, but I don't know what I'm going to do." "Mom, can I tell you something? You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be real. The mom I fell in love with wasn't perfect. She made mistakes and had bad days and sometimes got overwhelmed. But she was honest about it, and she never gave up trying. But what if being real isn't enough for the court? What if they decide I'm not stable enough? Then we'll deal with that when it happens," Ashley said, echoing the words Dr. Williams had spoken to Rebecca months earlier. "But Mom, running yourself into the ground isn't going to convince anyone that you're ready to take care of me. It's just going to make you sick." After hanging up with Ashley, Rebecca called David. "Rebecca," he said, answering immediately. "I've been worried about you. How are you?" "I've been an idiot," she said, "and I owe you an apology. You were right about everything." "Where are you? I'll come get you." When David arrived, he found Rebecca sitting on the curb, looking defeated, but not broken. They drove to his office, where Rebecca told him about the past 2 weeks, the obsessive working, the isolation from music, the physical and emotional exhaustion. "I think I was afraid that if I enjoyed anything, music, friendship, moments of happiness, the court would think I wasn't taking my responsibilities seriously enough," she said. David shook his head. "Rebecca, the court wants to see that you can build a stable, healthy life. That includes having sources of joy and meaning, not just grinding through each day like a robot." "I know that now. But David, how do I find balance? How do I work hard toward my goals without becoming obsessive about them?" "By remembering that recovery is about progress, not perfection," David said. "And by accepting help from people who care about you." That afternoon, they spent time working on music again, not frantically, not with the pressure of deadlines or grand ambitions, but simply for the joy of creating something beautiful together. Rebecca felt a sense of peace return that she hadn't even realized she'd lost. The next week, Rebecca had an honest conversation with Dr. Williams about her tendency toward perfectionism and how it was affecting her recovery. They worked on developing a more sustainable approach to her goals, one that included regular rest, social connection, and creative expression as essential components rather than luxuries. Rebecca also had a conversation with Maria about adjusting her timeline for custody proceedings. Instead of pushing for the fastest possible resolution, they developed a plan that prioritized Rebecca's long-term stability and well-being. "Rebecca," Maria said, "the court isn't looking for a perfect parent. They're looking for a parent who can provide consistent, loving care and who has the tools to handle life's inevitable challenges. The work you're doing on yourself, learning to manage stress, building a support network, developing healthy coping mechanisms, that's exactly what they want to see." 3 weeks later, Rebecca had another visit with Ashley, this time in a less formal setting. They met at Centennial Park, where they had spent many happy afternoons before Robert's death. "You look better, Mom," Ashley said as they walked around the lake. "More like yourself." "I feel more like myself," Rebecca replied. "I was trying so hard to be the person I thought everyone wanted me to be that I lost track of who I actually am." "And who are you actually?" Ashley asked with a smile. Rebecca thought for a moment. "I'm a woman who makes mistakes, but learns from them. I'm a mother who loves her daughter more than anything in the world. I'm a musician who finds healing in creating and sharing songs. And I'm someone who's learning that being imperfect doesn't mean being unworthy of love." Ashley hugged her mother. "That sounds exactly like the mom I remember and miss." As they continued their walk, Rebecca felt a deep sense of gratitude, not for reaching some imaginary finish line, but for being exactly where she was in that moment. Imperfect, growing, surrounded by people who loved her, and moving steadily toward the life she wanted to build. The road ahead was still long, but Rebecca now understood that the journey itself was where the real healing happened. 1 year after George Strait found Rebecca playing guitar on the rainy streets of Nashville, she stood in a small recording studio, preparing to lay down tracks for an album that would tell her story, and hopefully help others tell theirs. The studio, located in a converted warehouse in East Nashville, belonged to James Mitchell, a 45-year-old veteran who had found his own path to healing through music production. James had served 2 tours in Afghanistan as a combat engineer before returning home with PTSD that had cost him his marriage, his job, and nearly his life. "Music saved me," James told Rebecca during their first meeting. "When David told me about your project, about using music to help people in recovery, I knew I had to be involved." James had spent the last 5 years building his studio as a place where musicians with stories of struggle and recovery could record affordably. His walls were covered with photos of artists he'd worked with, former addicts, veterans, survivors of domestic violence, people who had found their voices through music. "The thing about trauma," James said as he adjusted the microphones for Rebecca's session, "is that it makes you feel like you're alone in the world. But when you hear someone else singing about the same pain you've experienced, suddenly you realize you're part of something bigger." Rebecca understood exactly what he meant. Over the past year, she had connected with other musicians in recovery, other parents fighting to reunify with their children, other women who had lost themselves and were working to find their way back. Her music had become a bridge between her past and her future, but also between her experience and the experiences of others. The album they were recording was called Second Chances, and it contained 12 songs that chronicled Rebecca's journey from loss through recovery to renewal. Some songs dealt with grief and addiction, others with hope and healing. There was Ashley's song, which had become a favorite among people in family reunification programs. There was When Home Feels Broken, which she had written with Tyler's help and which was being used by family counselors across the region. But the song Rebecca was most nervous about recording was the title track, Second Chances. It was the most personal song she'd ever written, dealing honestly with her failures as a mother while also expressing her determination to rebuild her relationship with Ashley. "Take your time," James said from the control room. "There's no rush. Just sing it like you're telling the story to someone who needs to hear it." Rebecca closed her eyes and began to play, her fingers finding the familiar chords while her voice carried the melody that had emerged from her deepest pain and strongest hope. "I used to think that love was enough to keep the darkness at bay. But when the world came crashing down, love couldn't show me the way. I lost myself in a bottle, lost my daughter to my shame, lost the woman that I used to be, lost everything but my name. But somewhere in the wreckage, I found a voice I'd never known. And in the songs of broken hearts, I found my way back home, We all deserve second chances. We all deserve to try again, to be the people we were meant to be, before the world caved in. So here I stand with empty hands, but a heart that's learning how to heal, and maybe that's enough right now. Maybe broken can be real. When she finished the song, the studio was silent for a moment. Then James's voice came through the intercom. "Rebecca, that was beautiful. I think we got it in one take." As Rebecca packed up her guitar, she reflected on how much her life had changed since that rainy night when George Strait had stopped to listen to her music. She now lived in a small apartment near Music Row. Having graduated from the Second Chances program 6 months earlier, she worked part-time at the coffee shop and part-time giving guitar lessons to other women in recovery. Most importantly, she had been granted weekend visitation rights with Ashley, with the possibility of expanded custody pending a court review in 6 months. The visits were going well, so well that Ashley had asked Harold and Diane if she could spend spring break with her mother. "I'm proud of you, Mom," Ashley had told her during their last visit. "Not just because you got sober, but because you didn't give up on yourself or on us." Rebecca's relationship with David had also evolved and strengthened. David had taken her advice about prioritizing his family, and his relationship with Tyler and Linda had improved dramatically. Tyler was now a regular volunteer at the studio, helping with equipment and occasionally contributing lyrics to songs about teenage perspectives on family problems. "You saved my family," David had told Rebecca recently, "by helping me remember what really mattered." "We saved each other," Rebecca had replied, and she meant it. The success of Rebecca's music was modest but meaningful. Her songs were being used in treatment centers, family counseling programs, and support groups across Tennessee and beyond. She wasn't making much money from her music yet, but she was making a difference, and that felt more valuable than any commercial success could have. Dr. Williams had helped Rebecca understand that her experience of loss and recovery had given her a unique ability to help others, but only if she continued to take care of herself first. "You can't pour from an empty cup," Dr. Williams often reminded her. "Your recovery has to be the foundation for everything else you do." Rebecca had learned to balance her desire to help others with her need for self-care. She still attended AA meetings twice a week, continued therapy with Dr. Williams, and maintained a network of friends and supporters who understood her journey. One of those supporters was Maria Gonzalez, who had become not just a professional ally, but a genuine friend. Maria's daughter Sophia, now 9 years old, had special needs that required constant attention and advocacy. Rebecca had begun volunteering with Maria to help other families navigate the social services system. "You understand what it's like to feel powerless in the face of bureaucracy," Maria had told her. "That empathy makes you incredibly effective as an advocate." As Rebecca left the recording studio that evening, she drove past the spot where George Strait had found her. She pulled over and sat in her car for a moment, thinking about the woman she had been then and the woman she was becoming. Her phone rang. It was Ashley. "Hi, Mom. How did the recording session go?" "Really well, I think. We finished the title track, and James thinks we'll have the whole album done by next month." "I can't wait to hear it. Mom, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "When you were on the streets, did you ever think you'd make it back? Did you ever think we'd be talking like this again?" Rebecca considered the question carefully. "Honestly, Ashley, there were many days when I didn't think I'd make it through the next 24 hours, let alone rebuild my entire life. But somewhere deep down, even in my darkest moments, there was a tiny voice that kept saying your name. That voice is what eventually led me back." "I'm glad you listened to it," Ashley said softly. "Me too, sweetheart. Me too." After hanging up with Ashley, Rebecca drove home to her small apartment. She made herself dinner, something she'd had to relearn how to do during her recovery, and spent some time working on a new song. This one wasn't about her own story, but about the people she'd met during her journey. James and his PTSD, Maria and her challenges as a single mother, David and Tyler's father-son reconciliation, the other women at Second Chances who were fighting their own battles. As she played and sang, Rebecca realized that her music had become something larger than personal expression. It had become a way of building community, of connecting people who might otherwise feel isolated in their struggles. There was a knock at her door. Rebecca opened it to find George Strait standing in the hallway, holding a copy of a Nashville music magazine. "I hope you don't mind me stopping by," he said with a smile. "I wanted to congratulate you on this." He handed her the magazine, which was open to an article titled "From the Streets to the Studio: Rebecca Patterson's Journey of Recovery and Renewal." The article featured photos of Rebecca in the recording studio and quotes from people whose lives had been touched by her music. "George," Rebecca said, stunned, "I can't believe you saw this. How did you even know where I lived?" "Nashville's music community is smaller than you'd think," he said with a laugh, "and your story has been inspiring a lot of people. David Coleman called me last week to tell me about the album and about how you're using your music to help others." Rebecca invited George in, and they sat in her small living room, talking about music, recovery, and second chances. "You know," George said, "when I stopped to listen to you that night, I was impressed by your talent, but I had no idea you'd turn your pain into something that could help so many other people." "I'm not sure I knew either," Rebecca admitted. "I was just trying to survive one day at a time, but I've learned that sometimes survival and service end up being the same thing." George nodded thoughtfully. "That's wisdom that can only come from experience. Rebecca, I want you to know that what you're doing, using your platform to help people in recovery, to give voice to people who are struggling, that's the highest calling any artist can have." Before he left, George asked Rebecca to play one of her new songs for him. She chose "Community of Broken Hearts," a song about the connections between people who had experienced loss and recovery. "We're a community of broken hearts, learning how to beat again, finding strength in shared scars, discovering that healing isn't something we do alone." In church basements and coffee shops, in recording studios and treatment centers, we gather to remind each other that our stories aren't over yet. We're teachers and students both. Each voice adding to the chorus, singing truths that set us free from the shame that tried to bury us. And maybe that's what grace looks like, not perfection but persistence, not the absence of struggle, but the choice to keep on trying. When she finished, George was quiet for a moment. "Rebecca, that's not just a song. That's a mission statement. You've found your calling." After George left, Rebecca sat at her kitchen table and wrote in her journal, a practice she'd maintained throughout her recovery. She wrote about the strange symmetry of having George visit her apartment exactly 1 year after he'd found her on the streets. She wrote about the album, about Ashley, about the community of supporters who had helped her rebuild her life. But mostly, she wrote about gratitude, not just for her recovery, but for the pain that had led to it. Without losing everything, she never would have discovered the depth of her own resilience. Without hitting bottom, she never would have found the courage to climb back up. The next morning, Rebecca received a call from Dr. Williams's office. It wasn't time for her regular appointment, so she was immediately concerned. "Rebecca, this is Dr. Williams. I have some news that I wanted to share with you personally. I've been asked to speak at a conference about innovative approaches to addiction recovery, and I'd like to invite you to speak with me about how music has supported your healing process." Rebecca felt a flutter of nervousness. "I don't know if I'm qualified to speak at a conference. I'm just one person sharing my story." "Rebecca, that's exactly what makes you qualified. Your story represents hope for thousands of people who are struggling with similar challenges. Your music has become a tool for healing, not just for yourself, but for others. That's exactly the kind of innovation the field needs to hear about. The conference was scheduled for 6 months later, which would give Rebecca time to prepare and also to see how her court review for expanded custody went. The timing felt significant. By then, she would have been sober for 18 months and would hopefully have Ashley living with her again, at least part-time. Over the following weeks, Rebecca threw herself into preparing for both the conference presentation and the custody review. But this time, she did so with the wisdom she'd gained from her earlier experience with perfectionism. She worked steadily, but not obsessively, maintaining her recovery routines and her connections with her support network. David helped her organize her thoughts about how music had supported her recovery, while Dr. Williams helped her understand the broader implications of her experience for addiction treatment. "What you've discovered," Dr. Williams explained, "is that creativity can be a powerful tool for processing trauma and building identity outside of addiction. Your music has given you a way to transform your pain into something meaningful, which is one of the most effective long-term strategies for maintaining sobriety." Meanwhile, Ashley was preparing for her junior year of high school and thinking seriously about her future. She had decided she wanted to study social work in college, inspired partly by her mother's recovery journey and partly by her relationship with Maria Gonzalez. "I want to help families like ours," Ashley told Rebecca during one of their visits. "Families that have been broken by addiction but are trying to heal." "That's a beautiful goal," Rebecca said. "But Ashley, I want you to make sure you're choosing that path because it's what you really want, not because you feel responsible for fixing other people's problems." Ashley smiled. "Mom, I learned something from watching your recovery. The best way to help other people is to first make sure you're healthy yourself. I want to study social work because I think I'd be good at it and because I care about it, not because I think I have to save the world." The wisdom in her daughter's words amazed Rebecca. At 17, Ashley had insights about boundaries and self-care that had taken Rebecca decades to learn. As summer turned to fall, Rebecca's album was completed and began to gain attention in recovery communities across the Southeast. Treatment centers were using her songs in group therapy sessions. Family court mediators were recommending her music to parents working toward reunification. Other musicians in recovery were reaching out to collaborate or share their own stories. But the most meaningful recognition came from an unexpected source. Rebecca received a letter from a woman named Catherine Walsh in Memphis, Tennessee. "Dear Rebecca," the letter began, "I heard your song, Ashley's Song, at my AA meeting last week, and I wanted you to know that it gave me the courage to reach out to my own daughter for the first time in 3 years. Like you, I lost custody due to my addiction, and like you, I've been working to rebuild my life. Your music helped me believe that it might not be too late for my family. Thank you for sharing your story." Rebecca read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face. This was why she had been through everything she'd experienced, not just to save herself and reunify with Ashley, but to help other families find their way back to each other. She shared the letter with David during their next meeting. "You know what this means, don't you?" David said after reading it. "What?" "It means your music is doing exactly what we hoped it would do. It's creating connections between people who need to know they're not alone." The custody review took place on a crisp October morning, exactly 18 months after Rebecca had entered the Second Chances program. She sat in the courtroom with her lawyer, surrounded by a support team that included Maria, Dr. Williams, and David. The judge reviewed Rebecca's progress report, which documented her sustained sobriety, stable housing, steady employment, active participation in recovery programs, and successful completion of parenting classes. Ashley's voice was also heard in the proceedings. Now 17, she was old enough to express her preferences to the court. She spoke eloquently about her mother's transformation and her own desire to rebuild their relationship gradually. "Your Honor," Ashley said, "my mother isn't perfect, and I don't expect her to be. But she's honest about her struggles. She's committed to her recovery, and she's the mother I remember loving before addiction changed our lives. I believe she's ready to be part of my daily life again." Harold and Diane Patterson also spoke in support of Rebecca's petition. "We've watched Rebecca work harder than anyone we've ever known to rebuild her life," Harold said. "She's earned the right to be Ashley's mother again." The judge's decision was thoughtful and measured. Rebecca was granted expanded visitation rights, including overnight visits and school holidays, with a plan to gradually increase custody over the following year if progress continued. It wasn't everything Rebecca had hoped for, but it was more than she had dared to expect. As she hugged Ashley outside the courthouse, she felt a deep sense of completion, not because her journey was over, but because she had proven to herself and others that redemption was possible. That evening, Rebecca, Ashley, David, Tyler, and Linda celebrated at a quiet restaurant in downtown Nashville. As they shared stories and laughter, Rebecca looked around the table and marveled at the community that had grown around her recovery. "I want to propose a toast," David said, raising his glass, "to second chances, to the power of music to heal, and to the courage it takes to rebuild a life from the ground up. To family," Ashley added, "both the one you're born into and the one you choose. To not giving up," Tyler contributed, "even when everything seems impossible." As they clinked glasses, Rebecca felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over her. 2 years earlier, she had been convinced that her life was over, that she had lost everything that mattered. Now she understood that losing everything had actually been the beginning of finding herself. The next month, Rebecca spoke at the Addiction Recovery Conference alongside Dr. Williams. Standing at the podium, looking out at an audience of therapists, social workers, and other professionals, she felt nervous but purposeful. "Recovery isn't just about stopping destructive behaviors," she told the audience. "It's about rebuilding identity, reconnecting with purpose, and learning to transform pain into something meaningful. For me, music became the bridge between who I was before my addiction and who I wanted to become in recovery." She played Second Chances for the audience, and when she finished, she received a standing ovation. But more importantly, she saw tears in the eyes of people who worked every day with individuals struggling with addiction. She knew her story had given them hope to take back to their clients. After the conference, Rebecca returned to Nashville with a sense of having completed an important chapter in her recovery story. Her album continued to reach people who needed to hear it. Her relationship with Ashley grew stronger with each visit. Her work with David evolved into a partnership that was helping other artists use their music for healing and social change. On the second anniversary of the night George Strait had found her playing guitar in the rain, Rebecca returned to that same corner. This time, she came not as a homeless woman seeking survival, but as a recording artist, a mother rebuilding her relationship with her daughter, and a woman who had learned to transform her deepest pain into her greatest gift. She brought her guitar and played for anyone who wanted to listen, just as she had 2 years earlier. But now, her music carried a different message, not just pain and longing, but hope and healing. And when people dropped money into her guitar case, she donated it to the Second Chances program, continuing the circle of support that had saved her life. As she played, Rebecca thought about all the people who had been part of her journey. George Strait, who had seen potential in a broken woman on the street. David, who had helped her rebuild her musical dreams. Maria, who had navigated her through the complex systems of social services. Dr. Williams, who had helped her understand the roots of her addiction and develop tools for lasting recovery. James, who had provided a place for her music to be heard. Ashley, who had found the courage to believe in her mother's transformation. And all the other people who had offered support, encouragement, and second chances along the way. But mostly, Rebecca thought about the woman she had become through the process of recovery, not despite her struggles, but because of them. She had learned that healing wasn't about returning to who she had been before, but about becoming someone new, someone who could hold both pain and joy, loss and hope, brokenness and wholeness. As the evening grew late and the street grew quiet, Rebecca packed up her guitar and walked back to her car. Tomorrow, Ashley would be coming for a weekend visit. Tomorrow, she would continue work on new songs for her second album. Tomorrow, she would attend her AA meeting and her therapy session and continue the daily work of maintaining her recovery. But tonight, she simply felt grateful to be alive, to be sober, and to be exactly where she was. A woman who had lost everything and found herself in the process of building something new. The rain began to fall gently as Rebecca drove home, just as it had been falling that night 2 years ago when a country music legend had stopped to listen to a homeless woman's song. But this rain felt different, not like an ending, but like nourishment for whatever was growing next. Rebecca Patterson's second chance had become not just a personal victory, but a song of hope for anyone who believed that it was possible to rebuild a life from the ashes of loss. And in a world where so many people felt broken beyond repair, that song was exactly what the world needed to hear. As she pulled into her driveway, Rebecca smiled at the simple miracle of having a home to return to, a daughter who loved her, and a future full of possibilities she had never dared to imagine. The melody for a new song was already forming in her mind, a song about gratitude, about grace, and about the unexpected ways that ending up with nothing can become the beginning of everything.